I'm back without glasses. There you are. Sweet. All right. Let's see if this works. You guys. Darn well, Instagram hates me. So, all right. I just sent you the invite, so you should be able to see it pop up on the screen. There's a yes. No way was it that quick. Awesome.
It worked.
I don't know what happened. I couldn't find you on my invite list, so I had to hold on. Let me lower myself down. I had to go out and reset it. It's always something. It's the Instagram platform. It's awesome for the community, but it's not necessarily the best one. I'm just afraid to go somewhere else quite yet. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I'm so excited. Oh, I'm so excited that you're here. I have so many questions I want to ask you. Anyhow, well, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. This is the Welding Women's Syndicate, and tonight we have Mary Jo Emmerich. So I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to join y'all.
Oh my goodness. So you're coming out of Florida right now, correct?
I am.
Awesome. Now you're normally based out of Austin area?
Yes. I live in Georgetown, but I teach in Austin and in Round Rock.
Right. Oh, awesome. I'm trying to get my phone situated, so I'm not trying to. Don't fall. Oh my goodness. So I just found that cool little snippet. You sent me your bio, and it had a snippet of you as a trainee.
It did.
That is such a cool picture. Now, there's so much. So just like I told one of the last interviewees, like I'm going to be like rapid fire succession here because I only have an hour with you and I have so many things. Like my little nerdy brain wants to ask all these questions. So excuse me if it's like kind of all over the place. I try to be a little bit more cohesive.
That's okay. That's okay.
But okay, so tell me, how the heck did you even get into welding?
I took a class at University of Houston in the early part of the 70s. That was a metal art class. And we had a small part that was stick welding, and we did casting, and we did some copper work, and it kind of got me started. And then I needed a job.
Right.
And somehow I got hooked up with a employment agency, and I mentioned how I learned welding, and he goes, well, there's a shop that wants to get women in the field. And it was double what I was making working at a grocery store. And I'd said, well, why not?
Right.
And so that got me into a big, that place that had a picture of me. That was Austin Steel, kind of
cool.
ironic, in Houston, Texas. And once I got there, it's like I'm hooked. I'm staying.
Yeah.
You know. And we started 3 women at the same time. I'm the only one that stayed. You know, most women would walk in and walk out at lunch, but I was too stubborn. I just went ahead and stayed.
You know what? I think what year was that you first got into
that was
job?
I think 75, 76.
That like blows my mind because now you would have that conversation with women and they're like, no, they're not calling me. Like they legitimately sometimes will not even call if they see a feminine name. You know what I mean? So the fact that they were actively recruiting and welcomed so many women in, that's just very interesting. And we're going to kind of circle back onto that one a little bit. So how well received were you when you were on that job?
How what?
Well received. Like how did they treat you?
Very standoffish. You know, they thought, you know, they would tell me, well, don't you want to be a secretary? You know.
Are you serious?
Yes. Yeah, I was 19 years old, and the guys were like, why are you here? Don't you know you have other things you could be doing? And but then I had the guys that would be willing to help.
Sure.
Lloyd, that they show in that picture, he was great. He was the one that really trained me how to weld. It was a very unusual job because it was a predominantly black shop, except for the supervisors who were men. but I'd be grinding, and the supervisors and other men from the office would come out and stand there and watch me. And I turned to Lloyd and go, why are they watching me? And I go, haven't they seen people grind? And he goes, not like that. So
Were you doing something wrong or
no,
what?
not at all. Not at all.
Okay, so you were just more efficient at your job.
Yeah, yeah. And they just never saw a woman grind. And
Oh, I get it.
so it was a novelty.
For
Yeah.
sure. And
Some of the supervisors were kind of abrasive, but they because the head people wanted you to be there, they were more accommodating.
sure. It's so interesting to see the ebbs and flows. I imagine you've seen the trends of women being wanted in a shop and not wanted. Like right now, it seems like there's a trend to actively recruit women into the shop. But how many times have you seen the ebb and flow with women in the trades?
Oh, a lot, especially since I worked in research at a university. Um, as the generations changed, there
Right.
was a there was very pro eras where men wanted us there, and then there were these down times when they resented us being there. So it was a back and forth. Where right now um, they need welders so severely that they see 50% of the population as a potential. you
Sure.
know so things are a little more proactive at this moment of getting women into it. But it has been a flow back and forth. It almost seems like oh, maybe a 7 to 10 year cycle of back and forth, because I'm looking at over 40 years now.
Right. No, that's true because I'm 10 years in with welding and there was nobody. Like I saw one person on TV that was Jessie Combs and she's a living or she's a legend. And then now you see it more like 10 years later, they're more actively doing it. Not necessarily well received, but actively doing it. I think they're well meaning.
Right.
But I sometimes I feel like I don't know. I don't know if they necessarily are recruiting for um a trend or if they're going for actual skill. That's what I'm worried about sometimes. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
imagine you've seen it. They absolutely need more welders. And they're like, well, I mean, we're human and we can do it. So why not? Who cares what our gender is? You know what I mean?
Well, if you think about it, during World War II, women came in and filled the slots as welding. And the welders that I met that were women were during the war.
Right.
And then as soon as the men came back, they gave up those positions and went back to wherever their positions were. Being that I'm in Texas, I think Texas is behind, because I train now all over the country, and I see other states that are much more active of
Mm-hmm.
or inviting of having women in the field. But you know, most of my career, I have been the only woman in the shop. And,
Oh,
but I do feel that during my career, I've had as many men that were helpful
sure.
and willing to share with me as women, as didn't, so, but I think that's somewhat our field too,
Sure.
because I've been blacksmithing now for about 20 years, and blacksmiths, they're more of a trade type of journeyman trade type of program, where they're like, if I know something, come here, I'll show you exactly what I know. Where welders are like, oh no, I don't want to tell you anything.
Yes, that is
You
so
know,
true.
because you're going to take my job, or you're going to become a threat.
Yes.
So it's a totally different mentality compared to some of the other trades. So I myself kind of even held that, because I specialized, and I was the only titanium welder in my area for a
I
really long
know.
time. That it's like, well, why would I want to teach another welder to do it when then they can compete with me? But now that I'm older, giving back,
Right.
it's not a threat anymore. I mean, you
Do
can't
you
take
think
anything.
that's what it was? Is that you're just young and full of yourself when you were younger, that you just didn't want to, you didn't want anybody to shine? Or is
I,
it,
I
do you
think
think
for a
as you've
lot,
gotten older, you're just kind of like a more calm and you're more logical thinking? You know what I mean?
and I think it's not a threat anymore. I mean, there, it'll take you a while to catch up with me, you know, so,
Sure.
but I
Heck
think a lot
yeah.
of that is that threat, you know, where people have jobs and they're protected of their jobs and they don't feel like the employer, you know, will look at, because there's such a history of, even though you have experience, they'll hire somebody cheaper just to come in that doesn't have near the experience.
Sure.
Uh, it's the mentality or the appreciation of our skill level is is a learning thing. You
Right.
know, people that don't do our skill don't realize what it takes to be a certified, you know, skilled welder. You
Sure.
know, we've all heard all the terrible statements like you could teach a monkey to weld, you know,
Right. Right.
and those kind of things. And it's rare that we find people that are, you know, engineers or upper upper supervisor understand the skill level it takes to do a lot of things that we do.
No, that's absolutely true. And I imagine, so people are probably wondering, like, who is this woman? Well, you just kind of highlight your career, because I have a whole list of things from just you entering when you first entered, was that when you were working with the Navy?
No, no, no. That's been since I've moved to Austin.
Okay, so would you just kind of highlight your career, like, because I
Well,
have like, I have helper, I have CWI, I have blacksmithing, I have teacher, I have, the article. So, like, would you kind of just go through that and we'll start talking about each one? And this is what she means, you guys, is about a skilled welder. She has the most impressive resume. My mouth dropped when we were talking. Like, I can only hope to have this type of resume in 20 years. You know what I mean? I'm still barely in the inception of my career. So these are like goals for me to look forward to. So I love the fact that I actually came across you. It's just so amazing to see a woman in this position. Like, you have so many great achievements under your belt. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about some of the highlights of your career.
well, like I said, I started out in structural steel and remained there for a couple of years. And I welded in Houston. And Houston is an amazing place for metal. You
Sure.
know, there is just every metal you want to see is welded in that area. And then from there, I went into pipe welding,
Cool.
and where I learned TIG, or as an educator, we're supposed to call it gas tungsten arc welding, you
Gita.
know. But
Right.
I'm a person that learned in the field,
Okay.
and I think that that's probably the biggest problem for us is terminology, you
Sure.
know, because there's slang and everything else. But I started TIG welding and I worked in a shop that did a lot of exotics. And of course, you start with taking a 6G test to even get hired into the shop. And we were welding Cooper nickels and stainlesses and I don't think I did much aluminum back then. And from there, I kind of lucked out and I went into a shop that did tantalum. So that's where I learned chamber welding.
Right.
And so I got hooked on exotics and I love reactive metals. And we welded some titanium, but more tantalum. And tantalum's probably tantalum, niobium, columbium. They're all very picky metals. And that's where I learned chamber welding. And every now and then, pipe welders would get paid more than, you know, they kind of felt like, you don't get dirty, you're clean, you're in an air conditioned shop. And it's like, nah, I work for money. So
Right. Right.
I went back to pipe welding
Sure.
and worked for a place called Progressive Metals that is still there. They made the launchers and receivers for the Alaskan pipeline.
Oh, wow.
I really enjoyed the pipe welding part of it. all 7018. Well, we'd root pass in our short circuit MIG, and then we'd come out and gouge that out after we put in our 7018 and weld those all up. And I'd, like most welders, I'd drag up anytime I thought I could get more down the street. And
Right.
and I did, you
Right.
know, and I'd go back to normally chamber welding, um, and welded, some really cool stuff. I got to go to New Orleans to weld a titanium scrubber, and we
Cool.
were adding tantalum onto it, and it's just really interesting to weld like tantalum using silver, using pure silver. So you're kind of doing a soldering process, but with a TIG torch.
Oh,
And it,
wow.
and actually that shop was doing pre-orbital.
Hmm.
They just were making machines to do orbital. I find it boring, but in this
Right.
area, it's kind of a hot topic. Um, Houston took a crash. And when Houston took a crash, and that's in the 80s, uh, we made the choice to move to Austin. My oldest son was special. Austin was a better place for him. And finding work as a welder in the 80s in Austin was a tough thing.
Hmm.
I started learning about some of the smaller shops and welding for them. And then I learned that the university had research facilities. And that hooked me, because I love research and I love that whole idea. And I found that they had applied research lab, which is a Navy lab.
Hmm.
And I kept an active resume. At the time, I was working for Applegate doing stainless and aluminum, and um, it took me 7 years to get a job at UT
Oh, wow.
and at the Navy lab.
Hmm.
And I applied for other UT jobs, and they say, you're overqualified, and they wouldn't want me, But this one came up, and they wanted me because of the titanium. They had done it at the facility. They wanted to do it, and so it was a long, drawn out process. But I got on. I stayed with them for 30 years. But in the meantime, I worked a lot of production shops all over town. Because because money,
Sure.
and to keep your skills up. There's a lot more you get from production than you do prototype. And I learned fabrication skills way down there in early on, and I love the fabrication, working from prints. And at the lab, our tolerance was like 5 thousandths. And as a fabricator, you have to look at them and go, really? You think that's what we're going to get here? You know. Um, but it's a neat opportunity because you work as a team. You're working with engineers that are learning to figure things out. You get to fabricate it. They get to see the end product. Then you get to see how it worked out, how you can tweak it. And in the meantime, I'm learning as much as I can. I'm reading as much as I can, doing as much research, because sooner or later I'm going to have to argue with the engineer.
Right.
I'm not going to argue with the engineer unless I've done my homework
Your
to be
homework.
able to show them. And then I guess 12 years ago, I chose to go ahead and get my CWI, which gave me another whole different level of understanding,
Yes.
welding and engineering and how they come up with decisions. And in the meantime, I guess 10 years ago, Austin Community College, I finally started working with them. And then they talked me into teaching metallurgy. And I know I say it uniquely. So I teach metallurgy for welders. And that's given me another whole view. And I have a business now where I do consulting and certified welding inspection.
Oh,
And my
cool.
specialty usually is exotic metals, or if you got in trouble and you need somebody to train you for OSHA to forgive you, I'm one of the people they would call to come in.
Oh, wow. You I still am learning things about you. You are so incredible. My goodness. Now, fun fact, you guys, the reason why I actually know who Mary Jo Emmerich is you were Sarah Stork's metallurgy teacher, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So if you guys remember, Sarah Stork, she was featured 3 or 4 weeks ago, and she's an amazing artist out of Texas. And I was just talking to her, and I was trying to like think of like there I need to have like formidable people on here. Like I want someone with a very cool career, because I think it's so important for us to see other women progressively getting better in their career in the welding industry. And you have so much education and experience under you. And she's like, my teacher. So I started digging through, and I was all, holy moly. And every time we have a conversation together, you just completely blow my mind. I mean, if you look at Sarah Stork's skill set, like you have to be fantastic. Like if you guys are even connected any way possible, holy moly. And then I just learned more, like the whole the OSHA part. I don't remember that for our conversation. So I'm telling you. So what prompted you to write that article in the American Welding Journal about chamber welding?
I wrote that article because in the late 90s, the market got flooded with titanium because of the wall coming down in Russia. And when the wall came down in Russia, I don't know how many of you are aware, but most of our titanium ore is in that area.
Right.
And it's the fourth most abundant metal on Earth. And at that time, when they flooded the market, also the American Welding Society had a big conference, and they decided to do the topic of titanium welding, which was pretty new to our industry, except in very few places. So titanium welders from all over the country came to the conference, and and we're all kind of looking for answers
Sure.
about what kind of problems we're running into. Well, the conference is taught by metallurgists. They weren't taught by welders, and a lot of they were advocating that you could weld titanium in the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
granted, you could weld it with trailers, or you could weld it, purging and other things, but they made it sound like you could weld it just like stainless. It's no different.
Oh
Well,
no.
that's not true at all. And at that time, I never welded titanium unless it was in a chamber. So I decided I was going to write an article to how to make a collapsible purge chamber, and how easy it was to make a collapsible purge chamber. And it was easier to do that and not risk, because titanium is like an oxygen sponge, or any contaminants that are in the air at all is going to be sucked right into the metal,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to brittle the metal. you know
Yes.
so um, I wrote that article out of being pissed off at American Welding Society.
Right.
And I was amazed that they almost wrote it um, word for word, printed word for what I wrote. But also I worked at UT, and at least 3 or 4 editors had checked it before UT would ever allow it to go out the door. And I was the first non-degreed person that had ever been published
Oh wow.
at the university, so it was
Yeah, it goes
pretty
through a
brag.
peer-reviewed process, correct? Isn't that
Yeah.
how that works? They go through the peer-reviewed process before publishing?
Well, at Applied Research Lab, because most universities want you to publish.
Mm-hmm.
So within our own group, we had professional editors, and then the editors would send it to the engineers, because all my upper supervisors are all engineers.
Mm-hmm.
So it went through all that process before, and it probably even went to from Applied Research, it probably went to UT itself for them to read it, to make sure before they would publish it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they send it to AWS, then AWS, it goes through them, and they review it.
That is, I think that's the coolest thing ever. I love just the fact that you're a woman and did it. I,
not sure they knew I was at that time because,
Well,
you know,
I saw the Mary Jo Emmerich because I went and searched it, so I was like, yep. Well, not that I didn't believe you. I mean, I
actually
had a whole link from it.
you probably saw Mary Jo Hession because that's
Yes, and that's what it says, Mary Jo Hession. Yes, it
my
does.
married name.
Right. Now it's funny that you say that because when we just talked a few days ago, I hadn't welded titanium. So, and I've been itching to do it way before we had talked, but I have been trying to go out to see a buddy who he welds on titanium all the time. And it just so happened I was going by his shop on, where the heck was I? On Wednesday? Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. So I actually had the opportunity to get my hands on some titanium. And when you say it starts brittling the metal, it was the most weird metal that I've ever worked with. It's, I guess in terms, it's similar to like the molten as a stainless, but you can definitely see. I wasn't using any type of chamber. I was just open to the atmosphere,
Right.
but you could see it. Like you would get a beautiful golden color, but as soon as like you took it off, it had that weird, like like it looked like it was getting brittle. And we didn't do any destructive testing. I was just trying to see how it felt. And it was so light. I was so amazed. Not just the metal itself, but just the puddle. Like when you're pushing stainless, it's heavy. You can feel it. But when you're using the titanium, it's so like light and airy. I was like, wow, this is so amazing. I took a video. I'm going to make a little video of it, but I didn't want to do it before. So I just wanted to talk to you about it. Now, do you think, go
I
ahead.
would think it's gummy. It's gummy. It doesn't wet well. It's kind of like Monel in a way.
You'll see me sticking a few times. That it's definitely very particular. You can't, there's no forgiveness with it. If you touch it, sticking. And I just laugh. Like, what can you do? You know what I mean? Like, it was the first time, and I was like, oh, it looks good. But then, like if you're running stainless and you touch anything, it's usually pretty forgiving. It doesn't necessarily stick. I had the tungsten stuck. I had the rocks. I was like, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. But it's a different metal, so you treat it differently. So he was like, you'll get the hang of it. I promise. And I'm sitting there and I'm recording it because I wanted to see it. And I was taking pictures of like, there's one where it's all beautifully golden, and then there's one where it's just like splayed out. And that's what you're talking about. It looks crystallized. And the heat was the same. My speed was the same, but it's just absorbing everything, and you can completely see it.
Yeah. It's actually my favorite metal. It's very cool. And I'm working with people now that are trailering it, which is not a choice I made I personally welded titanium, but I'm learning to adjust to it, and it's doable.
Sure.
I mean, plenty of companies and people that use trailers compared to chambers, and sometimes it works out better doing it that way, but it's different. Chambers have issues themselves because you're more restricted in your movement,
Right.
So and you're in rubber gloves, and if you accidentally touch the rubber, you're kind of in trouble, so they're different issues, but it's the choices you make.
Is it that they just choose or use different technology, or the trailer is just something that they want to use, or is it new for them? Or are they doing it differently?
Some of it's economics,
Sure.
because to have that much gas and flowing that much gas, some of it's convenience,
Sure.
because you're not restricted to your arm movements. And when I build chambers, I put a lens where I can look into the chamber.
Right.
A lot of commercial chambers, you're putting the lens on top of the chamber, so you're actually getting a refraction from
the right.
The whole issue, if you use hard chambers or hemispheres that are vacuum chambers, well, they're made for 6-foot men, and I'm a 5'3" woman. So
Right. I would see that be interesting
too.
Sure.
But there are lots of companies that use but they're more prototype. Like in a pipe shop, you're always running a certain size pipe. You can get trailers that are exactly for that size pipe. You know, you could purge your tube. It's not that big of a deal. So it just depends on what are you making, and how,
Makes sense.
you know, how you move. That's probably why I like military specs better than I did AWS specs, because they don't tell you how to do it. They tell you what the end result has to
Right.
be.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Um, so your favorite is titanium. Do you think that hold on. Do you guys have any videos on what you're talking about? Um,
No,
she wrote the article in American Welding Journal, and there's not too many pictures on your Instagram. I was doing my due
I know.
diligence and
No,
stalking you.
I'm terrible.
No,
Well,
it's okay.
part of that's because I worked for the Navy lab.
Right,
You know,
right,
I had to have all kinds of permission to do show any pictures at all. The ones that are there have gone through clearance.
right.
You know, so
To Destructive Asylum, I'm just answering his question real quick. Once we're done here, I will put the link for her article for chamber welding, so you'll kind of see the picture of what we're talking about, and you can go to the link. Also, if you just do a quick Google search on chamber welding, you'll see, I mean, there's various links on it. What we're actually talking about is titanium and welding in chambers. And I
Welding
had to get
Tips and
my,
Tricks does a nice video on titanium, and some of the bike builders do a nice videos on titanium.
I'm just getting into this one. It's so interesting that it just kind of culminated this way because I had been trying and trying, and then we had that conversation. I was like, oh, titanium, yes! And then I had the opportunity to actually get my hands on it. So I'm kind of excited. I always love something new. You know what I mean? Uh, that's sick, and
Well,
I
yeah,
fully
I
understand.
started to tell you
You're
the
welcome.
other day about the associations. Uh,
Yes,
there's a titanium association, and they have a lot of literature about titanium on the association.
right.
They're a little limited on what they show in welding, not compared to some of the other associations like aluminum or copper. Copper Association puts all kinds of videos about copper nickels, bronzes, all of them, you know, so it really depends on the associations. And to me, that's kind of my first resource when I'm looking for resources, because um, they they are the promoter of their metal, and they're going to be very factual. And I've been in front of the Navy inquiry, and when you want to have information that's going to back you up, those are the kind of people you're going to go to for information.
Is there a specific tungsten and filler when welding titanium, AC or DC?
Well, titanium is welded in DC, DC negative, like stainless. Really depends on your machine. I'm kind of a old school lover of Cinco Way, but my friend John McGee, who's a professor, has made me appreciate dynasties a little more. So
That's what I used.
I'm trying to love dynasties, or I love some of the technology. I always kind of make this issue that I feel like a dynasty is like a microwave compared to an oven, you know, but welding.
I can't wait till my buddy hears that. I love Dynasty. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Oh, my friend Mike,
Dynasties are
he,
awesome.
day one welding, he's arguing with me. He loves dynasties too, you know, but dynasties you're going to think about zirconiated or serrated, you know, unless you have very new ones. A lot of them aren't even programmed for thoriated. And I've been using thoriated for 40 years,
Right.
but I actually like ice. Ice is probably my favorite tungsten. You know, it's a cryogenic thoriated tungsten. I feel like they'll take a beating and be forgiving. You know, but if you
I'm
ever
ready.
read a diamond pamphlet on welding, they'll tell you exactly what each tungsten is, and then they'll say, try them all.
Yes.
Find out what you like the best.
Right.
You know, to me, your grind is going to be the biggest thing. You asked about the filler. Well, titanium is one of the few metals that we can go down the scale when we talk about commercial. Commercial pures are grade 1 through 4. And it's one of the few that we talk about it in grades. So if I'm welding a grade 2, I can use a grade 1 because unless I'm in a chamber, my weld will become a grade 2.
Right.
Once we get to alpha betas, like grade 5, you have to use grade 5, and the codes will tell you that. I'm working under D 1.9 code, which is the newest of the titanium codes.
Right.
But as I was certified under D17, so two totally different codes, but I have a little more respect for D 1.9. I didn't think I'd like it, but I have some respect for it.
Sure.
And they've done a good job of writing that code.
That's so awesome. You have the coolest career, I promise. I just love the fact that I even was able to do it before we talked. I had no idea that was even going to happen. It's been something I've been trying after. I had a student who was that was like his profession, actually. He came into the welding class and he knew how to TIG weld, but he didn't know how to do any other process. Oh, did you lose me? Uh-oh.
Yes,
I'm
I
back.
touched the screen and went, whoa.
Oh, I think, did you hear the part about me talking about the titanium, getting my opportunity to, okay. So I was just saying that I love the fact that I had the opportunity to do it before I talked to you. It seems like it keeps coming up in conversations a lot more lately. One of my students, he came in and he only knew how to TIG weld titanium. That was his specialty. He didn't know any other process. So I was hoping to get that from him. We just didn't have enough time. So now I had the opportunity to do it before we talked, and we had like such a cool conversation about this being a more in-demand metal. And I don't see hardly any schools teaching this. Is this something that you guys also teach at your school right now?
I show it to the welders in metallurgy, because metallurgy will do a welding, and I try to expose them to as many different metals as I can. It's
Sure.
only going to be their chance. Destructive Asylum just asks, cannot be welded in normal atmosphere. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you're welding, and at the moment I can't remember if it's class A, B, or C, or class 1, 2, or 3, but I believe it's C. Your lower class, color's not restricted, so you could weld it in that. That's a non-critical weld. But
Right.
whenever, even in stainless, when we have colors in our weld, we're sucking in atmosphere.
Right.
And we're sucking in atmosphere. If you're in petrochemical, it's a point of attack. Thank you, Mike. He said A, B, or C. So it really depends on what class you're doing and what weld. If you're talking about anything that's going to flex, because titanium is a fatigue cycle, cracks like aluminum does. And if you're a fatigue cycle crack, you want to be as ductile as you can be.
Right.
So colors and atmosphere are an issue. You can't weld it on top of a carbon steel table. You have to weld it on an aluminum table or a stainless, put a stainless between you. You don't want carbon contact. So there's issues. And yeah, it's an oxidation issue, and oxidation isn't our friend as a welder.
Right.
That was why there's a lot of conversation about going to space station and welding up in not in our atmosphere. We would have less problems than we do in our atmosphere, but it has a lot to do with our atmosphere.
I love that they're asking these questions. Learning something new every day, man. I'm telling you, it keeps coming. It is applicable right now because it definitely keeps coming up in a lot of conversations. And I don't necessarily see anybody teaching it. So the fact that I even had my hands on it.
I think Miller might teach it in their race car. They have a race car training, and they might teach it. I don't really know. I I kind of looked at that class a little bit, and I can't remember what all they were, because we're seeing it more in exhaust. You
Right.
know, that's a real common thing. It
That's what
was
I was welding.
bicycle
Yeah.
and in exhaust. And
Yep.
I welded for the motocross racing, and they did exhaust.
Right.
You know, um, but some of their issues is their autogenous or fusion welding. And anytime you're doing a fusion weld, you're removing some material.
Right.
And at one job, we did some tensile pulls on fusion weld compared to filler weld. Sarah's bringing up Jesse James.
We'll get to that. We promise.
You know, and there was 20,000 psi difference between fusion welding and filler welding.
How
You
much
know,
PSI?
20,000.
Oh, wow.
You know, which is a lot,
Yes.
and it has to all do with ductility.
Right.
Sometimes that's okay, you know, for some applications that we do, like vacuum.
Right.
But for some applications, that's not okay.
I'm writing this all down. I'm like a sponge. I'm sucking it all in like the titanium. No, and it's interesting. I noticed that you really have to feed in a lot of filler with the titanium. I noticed that it melts in and it spreads very, very quickly. And then I did it autogenously, and then I did it without, just so I could see this. That's just how you learn, you know. I did it
Right.
both ways because I wanted to feel the puddle. But once I got it, and I was like, man, it definitely eats up a lot. Like, you have to put it in before you actually can see, because it almost leaves like a concave unless
Yeah.
you push in the filler metal enough. You know what I mean? So I get that. That's why I wanted to be able to see it in my head by doing it before we talk. So I'm so happy that I had the opportunity to do so. But yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's that wettability, you know, of it not wetting. And that's why U grooves and J grooves are used more commonly in titanium, also in aluminum like 6061, you know, so it can flatten that weld out.
Flatten. Right. You have a question. It says, is it true the colors that come up in stainless when welded bring carbon to the surface?
Yes, Mike, it does. It actually burns the carbon. So yes, it's bringing it up to, and that's why the codes have color restrictions. You know, the desirable color in titanium, in stainless is gold, and people that are getting above gold are overheating. Gold is
Right.
also telling us that we're hitting over 450 degrees, and there is an interpass restriction to stainless of 450 degrees. For those of you that don't know what it means by interpass temperature, it has to do once you do a weld, and when you stop the weld, we take the temperature of the metal, and that tells us what the interpass. And until it goes below that, you shouldn't be welding it again. You know, but there are colors that happen when you do weird things like corner welds and pipe welds. Sometimes it's totally unavoidable to
Right.
get colors, even using Fuchs and, you know, as big a cups as you can. But colors are usually telling us oxidation levels and heat levels. When I test welders, the first thing I want to look at is their backing bar, because I want to see a heat mark. If I
Right.
don't see a heat mark, I know they didn't really penetrate that root, you know, and they didn't get what they needed to. You know, they're always wondering why the hell I'm looking at that, you know, until we bend. But it tells you, you know, colors tell you things, and um, even colors on your tungsten tell you your oxygen levels.
Yep. Okay, so I know, I saw what Sarah posted, and I didn't even want to get to that yet, but I'm still like, I have notes. I have like a half a page of notes right now. Goodness, Sarah, but we're getting into 12:48. I have no idea how that even happened. I told you I was trying to go rapid fire succession.
Oh yeah, I forgot to
I
even.
knew it was gonna go so fast with you. So it's very interesting because I posted my original post on my page to, you know, to kind of just advertise that we were going to be talking to you, and I hit Jesse James because of our conversation. Now, wouldn't you know, Mr. Jesse James was on my page. Now, you, so you were telling me you had some affiliation with the Monster Garage. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
I did a Monster Garage build. I want to say it's number 73. It's the last of the all-female um, crew. We did a dirt track, and we're the successful female crew, you know. So I did do a Monster Garage build. I do have the toolbox in my
That
garage,
is so cool.
you know. So uh, and occasionally I hear from Jesse.
Now, what is the deal with your Instagram handle as of Queen of Welding? What was the conversation with that name?
I was at FabTech. I think I was with Day One Welding at that time. No, I think it was before I went with another group. And at FabTech, and they were telling me Jesse was there. He was there showing his sculpture that he made with Paley. And we didn't even talk about my blacksmithing, or we barely touched it, but he was doing a sculpture where he started it and he sent it to Paley. And Paley is the best American blacksmith. He took blacksmithing into art to be recognized as art. And then Paley would finish it, and vice versa. Paley started one and Jesse finished it.
Oh,
And
that's so cool.
to talk about blacksmithing at FabTech, which we have a very strong blacksmithing program at Austin Community College. It's my degrees. I have 2 degrees are in art metal and in blacksmithing. It seemed kind of redundant to me to get a welding degree when I had been a 30-year welder, and art's what brought me to welding. So I was
Right.
going that route, you know. But the name comes from Jesse calls himself Pope of Welding.
Right.
I said, well, damn, if he's a Pope of Welding, I'm the Queen of Welding. So
I love it. You
I
definitely are. I love that. I actually saw. I think you guys must have been at FabTech, but I saw the picture of Jesse near a sculpture when I was doing my
yeah,
Google
yeah.
research. I thought at first it was skills, but no, I think it was a sculpture contest.
No, it was I have it on my Instagram, and it was at FabTech.
Okay, that's what it was. That's what it was. I was just trying to Google just to find stuff, you know what I mean? Because I was trying to get more pictures because you're lacking in them. But I used that one because I thought it was so cool. It was like, the inception of when you were the welder training, which I thought that was pretty cool to see that one. Let's see. Oh, before I know, gosh, how is time already running out? Anyhow, I don't care. We're gonna go over. It's my show, darn it. Anyhow, so we were kind of talking about, or you were talking about teaching at Austin Community College. Now, what do you think? You've had many women come through your program now, correct?
A fair amount.
Many-ish. I know I say many, but more than I've seen. But I was looking at one of your classes, and I think it was a blacksmith class. It was all women. Is that right?
Or you might have been looking at a picture that we were doing for Carhartt. And
Oh, okay.
all women. I don't think I've ever seen an all women class, but in blacksmithing, we definitely have more women than we do in welding. And in art metal, we have a lot of women, which is kind of a double-edged sword for some of us, because I can't stand it when I tell somebody I'm a welder and they go, do you do art? And
Ah!
I go, is sonar art? I kind of
I
think it
love you.
might be, you know.
Right.
But to be fair, that's where I see more women. In blacksmithing, women are taking it by storm.
Sure.
Because in the younger blacksmiths lately, they've been doing more sledging.
Mm-hmm.
And to see women do sledgehammer welding instead of power hammer is pretty darn awesome. There's a blacksmith I like a lot, and his name's going to escape me at the moment. It'll come back in a minute. But they do team where his wife is it swings the hammer.
Oh, that's so cool.
and they've won. They do it in Vegas,
Hmm.
and it's a team blacksmithing competition. And in the farriers, you see quite a few women
Yep.
farriers,
Yes,
you
you
know.
do.
So it's just, to me, I just love metal and that all different aspects of metal. And to me, this is just another aspect of metal.
Do you think that to kind of remove that stigma and to make it less of a novelty for women in the trades, we had talked about this, talked about introducing women or younger women at an earlier age. Do you think that would help? Like taking it into our younger schools?
Oh, I do. I do think it would help to, because high school is the first real years that they get exposed. They have an opportunity to weld,
Hmm.
So I think if we introduced it in middle school, then they would know to request it in high school.
I agree.
Because I know when I went to high school, and I'm a 73 graduate, that it was an option. There was no way they were going to let us in welding or in machining, you know. But the guys could take home ec, you
Hmm.
know. Um,
That double-edged sword again.
yeah, when I took the class at University of Houston, um, some of the other students were like, I was the only woman in that class, and they're like, "Why are you here?" You know, and um, I think that would help. I think that would help, and it would help the women know that this is an opportunity. I just think as far as when it comes to jobs and careers, we need to quit sexualizing. Saying you're a male nurse or you're a female nurse.
I
You
agree.
know, our sex has nothing to do with our job.
No, it does not.
There are jobs. I want to be recognized as a welder,
Same.
you know, and to me, that's the more important part.
Some of us just want to work. We don't care
Yeah,
what we look like. You know what I mean? Like, can I just do the job? And if you can't, let me do it. I don't know
well,
why it has
no,
to be sexualizing it like that.
I think that's one thing that's wonderful about our jobs is we can test. How many other jobs can you go and prove yourself?
Right.
And if they test me, they have to hire me.
Right.
So I just think that's absolutely wonderful. Because you can't do that in hardly any other careers.
Yeah.
And I think we're fortunate that we can. And that's what got me into shops, because if they had that test in their hand and they didn't hire me, they would have to explain why that test they didn't hire.
Right. I know. I sometimes have mixed feelings about, when people have to have a certain amount of women. I'm thinking, why can't you just base it on talents? You know what I mean? Why can't I don't get that part sometimes. I guess I've never felt like I couldn't just walk into a shop and get a job. You know what I mean? Because I've always been like, I guess unconventional when it came to things that I like. So when it has to come down to a certain amount of women, I hate that. I want to be based on
I agree.
talent and skill. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna let in five women, not necessarily as skilled, but because they're women, they have to come in. I mean, that doesn't make you feel good. And then they treat you differently because, oh well, they had to hire a certain percentage. Now you are really the novelty. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've always been a lover of the voice, because the voice, they can't see the person, and I kind of like that whole idea of blind, and I think for everybody, for equity in general,
Sure.
I don't want you to hire me because I'm a woman. I want you to hire me because I'm the best candidate for the job,
Yeah.
and I don't care, what my sex is, what my race is, that's not the issue. Is, can I do my job?
Sure.
you know and in our field, there's all levels and differences of jobs, for people that aren't as strong, or if you're going to work in a field that you have to be able to pick 40 pounds up, weight lift until you can. you know
Yes.
you have to be able to meet the requirements of your job, whatever your job is.
I agree. Yeah, I see that a lot. I've seen that a lot of just not necessarily friends, but just people I've come across where they've complained about certain things like that. I'm like, you're coming into a job that requires you. One of my former jobs, it was 75 pounds, if you can't meet the requirement, don't apply and don't expect special treatment, because as a woman, the next woman that comes in behind you, they're going to look at you and question whether or not you can do it because you expected special treatment. I'm not expecting that. I'm not going to apply for it if I can't freaking do it. You know what I mean? So I hate when people think like, well, I'm just going to do it because they have a chip on their shoulder or whatever the situation is. That makes it bad for the rest of the women that come in behind you, you know?
Well,
So I
and
think it's important to at least meet the requirement.
even when I first started, where, men were trying to be helpful and you have to pick up 45 pounds to put it into the machine, they're wanting to come over there. It's like, no, don't, this is my job. I can do
Yeah,
it, and I know they're trying to be helpful, but they're taking away from you at the same time,
I agree.
you know, and um, because they have to do it, and a lot of them to even do more. I
Sure.
think the iron workers union, I forget how much they have to carry on their shoulder, go down to a crouch position, come back up and follow, keep carrying it on the beam.
Sure.
Not anything beam walking, not for me, but you know, uh,
Sarah.
I think that I have all the admiration that they can do it, and they do it. That's a requirement for the job, and you should be able to do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if you don't think you can do it 100%, figure it out. You know what I mean? If you're going to at
Yeah.
least try to be in that job, figure it out. Because I know there's been times when I had my own shop and I was like, holy crap, how am I? We were trying to pick up, beds, dually beds. I pick up a dually bed with just myself and my partner. That I've seen 4 men struggle. So I know I'm stronger than a damn ox. You figure it out. You know what I mean? You got to get it done. You really don't have that choice. So you figure it out. You just start thinking of things and overhead crane and like, whew, I've been in
You
some
got
very
legs.
interesting, precarious positions, let me tell you. But you figure it out. I definitely don't want any type of like special treatment. What was it? I had one job requirement. It was I had to be able to get through a 15-inch manway. Whoa. If my head can get through, my body can get through. I'll figure it out.
Well, back when I was working at pressure vessels, I had to get into 15-inch pipes, and I was the only one that could. So they go, "Hey, we got a pipe," and it's like, oh man, I hate it.
Sometimes being tiny is not necessarily good. Sometimes I kind of like that part because I'm 5'9", so that can take a long time pulling me out of that sucker. I love it. So I think like I agree with you on that part. Introduction at a younger age would definitely help treat women as less of a novelty, and then just giving them that option and just seeing people like yourself with such a rich and successful career and so many different levels. You know what I mean? The
Yeah,
CWI, you've done like cool stuff like with Jesse James, titanium writing, and American Welding Journal. All so many different aspects of your career that this is a possibility. It's things for me myself. Like I'm like, one day that's going to be me. You know what I mean? Like I love that because there's not necessarily enough women out there for me to look toward to like further my career, so I have to be the pioneer. So I'm absolutely like stoked to have come across you like, oh, I'm gonna do that, like I'm gonna change the world. You know what I mean? I like that. I think we as women, we need more people to look forward to, you know what I mean, like to pave the way for others. So I think it's very important, and the younger it is, the less of a stigma, I believe, right?
well, I think we have to just have faith in ourselves, whether we see other people doing it or not. But
Sure.
I kind of thrive off of the you can't do it and go, how, what are you saying over there? It
Sure.
just fuels my fire, but not everybody's that way. But I think you really have to decide for yourself, what do you want and what way are you going to do.
Sure.
My love and addiction for metal is, really what keeps me here.
I think that's what it has to come down to, eventually how much love you actually have for the metal. Because I didn't even know it was an option. I just knew that it was that one trade I needed under my belt when I was in real estate and investment. And when I walked into my shop for the first time, it was just an evolution after an evolution. Like I just keep changing my career and keep changing and just keeps getting more and more. And it was because like Like I just walked into a shop the other day and all I did was smell it and all the memories of my past career. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is why I love it, because I just absolutely love metal. And it, I don't know how to explain it, articulate it, but it is. Every aspect of my journey I have absolutely loved. And I think if somebody could just, find that within themselves, you're going to love every aspect and you're going to want to strive to do this and have this and get that career or have that certification and move forward. But not everybody has that, I
Yeah.
completely agree with that.
Well, that's what makes us welders.
Right. It's funny too, because who is it talking? I was watching somebody's story, and I think they were just talking about it being super duper hot and sweltering, and oh no, it was students at a college, and they're oh my word, air conditioned inside, okay, with the most magnificent ventilation, and they're like, it is hot, and I was thinking, what? You are not going to make it in this. And I was thinking, like, one of my jobs in Fort Smith, huge, massive, like 150,000 square foot building, no air conditioning, 100 degrees, 100% humidity, just dripping sweat, like 4 machines down the middle on half-inch plate. And I was just happily welding, just like dripping sweat, shocking the hell out of myself because I'm sweating through my gloves. That's love right there.
Yeah, when they tell me it's hot, I usually bring them to Texas Heat Treater over to the blacksmiths and say, why don't you hang right here for a little bit?
That's hot. Yeah.
That
Sarah, oh, she's laughing over here.
I
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I know we have to wrap up. I know. It's when, oh my goodness. How did it go so fast, Mary Jo? I just knew this was gonna happen. All right, let's let me wrap it up. Let me see. What is one good piece of advice you would give to someone, man or woman? It doesn't really matter. Whomever wants to strive to become a welder, what piece of advice would you give them as they're entertaining the idea of becoming a welder or going into the welding trade?
well, I would really say, learn the metal, love the metal, and like heat.
Like
Yeah.
heat.
And um, and you can do it. And do whatever you need to have the strength for whatever you do.
Yeah, I agree. It just basically comes down to that. It's so well said and so simply put. Like, just do what you need to do to educate yourself on it and love the metal. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. And I have to ask you about something. If it's too late tonight, I will call you tomorrow, but I'm going to send you a text. But oh my God, you guys, I absolutely knew that this was going to go way faster than I had hoped. Because I have still so many questions I want to ask you. Maybe we'll do a part 2 if you don't mind.
We could do
Anyhow,
that.
I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I appreciate your amazing career. Like, I have so much stuff.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
thank
be
you.
bugging you from now on. Then I think. Um, Anyhow, I know it's getting late for you, but I really do appreciate you coming on and talking about your career and just like giving us so much information about titanium and sharing the different aspects of your whole welding journey. So hopefully we can get you back on another time to ask the other set of questions.
Okay, we get back on when I'm back in Texas. And it will be
Awesome.
10 o'clock at night.
I know. So sorry. And I really want to go more into the blacksmithing aspect too. That's a realm I have not gone into. And I definitely want to talk about the program and just that whole aspect of it.
Yeah,
But
I love that part too.
yeah, good deal. Then we'll have to plan that. But I appreciate you, Mary Jo, and I will talk to you soon. And I will tag all the stuff that we're talking about. And then hopefully I'll be able to get all the links to everybody too as well.
And feel free to call or text.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And have a good night.
Okay, you too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.